William Bradford, speaking in 1630 of the founding of the Plymouth Bay Colony, said that all great and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred.
From the NBC News Election Center in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and John Chancellor.
Good evening and welcome to NBC News' coverage of the 1980 presidential election. Our team of correspondents, analysts, pollsters, and commentators is assembled here in New York and around the country to see if Jimmy Carter can win re-election or if Ronald Reagan will be going to the Oval Office. We have been polling around the country in the key states, NBC News and the Associated Press, and what we're learning in the key states is that makes us believe that Ronald Reagan will win a very substantial victory tonight.
I promised you 4 years ago that I would never lie to you, so I can't stand here tonight and say it doesn't hurt.
I want to be a veterinarian because I like to help animals. I want to be a fireman so I can save people and put out fires. I want to be a teacher. I don't know. I want to be an astronaut.
I guess the one thing I really wanted to be when I was a kid is a pilot.
To play on Night Rider.
I used to go out to the Blue Earth Airport and watch planes take off. If I could only be a pilot.
Are you ready? I've come here today because I care about my country, and I ask you to come with me.
To set sail towards America's destiny.
A better life for all who will work for it, and a better future for the next generation.
So today we call for a new patriotism.
For a president who will turn this country in a new direction. I want to lead a process of renewal in America.
And I believe in opportunity.
An era of opportunity greater than anything any generation of Americans has ever known.
Balancing the budget and reforming government.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to talk about how to solve the problems that we defined that face our country. I think we can come to the conclusion immediately with this quote. History repeats itself. The budget should be balanced. The Treasury should be refilled. Public debt should be reduced. The arrogance of public officials should be controlled. These are not new words. Cicero said these words over 2,000 years ago, but certainly they apply to our country today.
Excuse me, everybody.
There we go.
Hi, young lady.
Hi.
What's your name?
Destiny.
Destiny. What a wonderful name. Boy, are we glad to meet you.
You're 8 years old. Do you like Mr. Clinton?
Yeah.
Why do you like him? It's okay.
I think the press is real confused about its role now, and that's not surprising because I think a lot of people in America are confused. Business leaders are trying to figure out how to be more competitive, and they're having to undo the thinking of, decades. Workers and labor leaders are trying to figure out how to save jobs but enhance productivity. I mean, we go down the line. Everybody's trying to redefine their role.
Governor, if you could walk up a bit and then slowly walk back towards us.
And then we want you to do it on rollerblades.
Could you start a little further back? Just up.
You know what he's saying? What the hell am I doing, mister? That's good.
Okay. Right.
New Hampshire, a landscape of wintry beauty. A battleground for those who would be president. For the many disenchanted and disillusioned voters, that means New Hampshire also would be the first state to be lied to.
Well, those famous words, we're from Washington, we're here to help you.
The economy today.
The economy.
The economy.
It's just too hard to make a living.
I think we should be providing them jobs. That's what the hell it's all about, period. Jobs.
It isn't going to move unless you challenge it frontally. And that's the whole basis of
Democrats early on bring up a touchy offshoot of the economic issue, health care.
I mean, you got 5 people here in midlife crises trying to make their point about what health care should be.
You could say it started in the supermarket. That's where the sensationalist tabloid The Star is sold. The newspaper reports that Bill Clinton has had extramarital affairs, 5 of them. The allegations are based on a 1990 suit filed by a fired Arkansas state employee, Larry Nichols.
Voters know that the Star and the National Enquirer and all those places are garbage. I mean, this is a guy that got fired for making illegal phone calls on state money.
Even though this is supposed to be the straight, strictly issues campaign, the charge of adultery instantly dominates.
Is it something that's going to be dogging you through the campaign, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I think if something like this comes up, it's plainly false and it's been demonstrably untrue, I'll be glad to say.
But the general subject material, as you know, is something that is not
that
new.
too.
I'm not prepared tonight to say that any married couple should ever discuss that with anyone but themselves.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Bill Clinton.
Hi, Bill.
Hey, I tried to call you. I can't believe I got you.
Well, when did you try to call me?
Last night, late?
Well, I was there.
I started calling as soon as I got home last night, and I called for a couple hours.
Times are hard. I need a job.
I've been laid off since September.
You're applying for a position in service.
People are dying in the streets because of homelessness. It's not easy. If you get sick out here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out here in the same situation.
Thank you. New Hampshire tonight has made Bill Clinton the comeback kid.
Hello, Washington.
3 more days, I think we'd have won the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, right. This is New Hampshire calling. Are you listening?
I understand how to create a job and the difficulty of creating a job. Paul Tsongas has never created a single job.
Washington, we are sending you a message.
I don't believe the Democratic Party, the party of Roosevelt and Kennedy and Carter, will nominate Paul Tsongas, a pro-nuclear business lobbyist.
Answer the phone and tell George Bush he cannot concede till November.
The Democrats in Washington are saying that there is still time and space for other Democrats to jump into this race. What's your response to that?
Well, if they want to come in, let them come in. I mean, they presume that I was not viable, that Bill Clinton was not viable. If they think a Washington insider is going to come in and rescue the country from us, then I think they have a very different perspective. That's why people hate Washington. That's the arrogance that Washington exhibits that people find offensive.
I believe that there is so much waste around here. And again, every time you get into, see, I'm the only guy that talks numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. Nobody else will even talk about it. I've said, it's like a crazy ant in the basement. Everybody knows she's there, but nobody talks about her.
When we say we will put America first, we mean also that our Judeo-Christian values are going to be preserved. And our Western heritage is going to be handed down to future generations and not dumped onto some landfill called multiculturalism.
The Bush people were forced to send in top surrogates for the president, including First Lady Barbara and Vice President Dan Quayle. Bush himself would later campaign in the state, and oftentimes he seemed hyper and out of touch.
The other one is that people say, well, you know, you're in trouble in New Hampshire. Well, that may be, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to take the questions. I'm here to say, hey, there's a lot to do in partnership. The federal government, the state government, where you've got superb leadership, and the people themselves. And of course we care. And I you know, somebody gave me the analogy of a country western song about a train, hoping they see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not a train coming through. And I trumped it with saying, well, if you're gonna, you remember the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band one, if you got any country music people here, if you're gonna see a rainbow, you got to stand a little rain. Well, New Hampshire stood more than its share of rain, and job hurting, and families wondering how they're going to make their ends meet. But there is going to be a rainbow out there. There's some fundamentals that are pretty darn good, and yet we've got to do better.
Today from dawn to dusk, the Buchanan Brigades met King George's army all along the conquered Manchester-Nashville line, and I'm here to report they are retreating back into Massachusetts.
Actually, Catherine, the cries are rather muted. We've had a written statement from the president himself. Chance to talk with White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater, who acknowledges that the president has absorbed some enormous body blows, as he puts it, up in New Hampshire, and says that from now on the Bush campaign will have to pay a little bit more attention to drawing the distinctions between Mr. Bush and Mr. Buchanan.
Now is the time to take back America. If you want to join in the fight to make this country work for us, for all of us, for we the people, finally there's something each of us can do. Listen to Jerry Brown on this recent TV interview.
How can I, as somebody who's raised $18 million over the last 15 years and have been truly in the business of politics, now come on and say, okay, now we want a grassroots revolution? Well, I'll tell you, I know how the system works. I've been a part of it. And out of that experience, and having been away from it for 8 years, I've come back and said, it is so rotten, it is so paralyzed, that I think we ought to try to bring the people back by limiting contributions to $100.
Every one of these debates, Senator Tsongas has been reading to the rest of us, and we have never done that. But the implication, if it's printed, it's true. Now, here's a Time magazine, March 2nd. One area particularly in which Tsongas would have the government take a leading role is in the creation of nuclear power plants. Tsongas calls for building 300 to 500 megawatt plants rather than the current 1,200 megawatt models. Now, I didn't lie, and maybe he thinks the Time magazine author lied, but since we have a presumption that the printed word is always true in these debates with Senator Tsongas, I'm quoting from it. Let me say one other thing. The first untrue negative ad in this campaign was run against Bob Kerrey and Bill Clinton by Paul Tsongas, who ran an ad saying that we were for a middle-class tax cut to increase the deficit of the United States, when both of us called for an increase in the incomes and the taxes of people who were upper-income people whose taxes went down in the 1980s. That was the first negative ad in South Dakota and Georgia. Who knows where else it ran, and it wasn't true then, and it's not true now.
All right, we're into free for... Hold on, we'll get to it.
I'd like to chance it.
We're into free-for-all time here, and we're going to let Senator...
We didn't get the answer.
Yeah, he did. Well, if we're in the free-for-all, yeah, I'd like to say... I'd like to try to...
Wait a minute.
I would like a chance to respond if I can.
We're going to start with Senator Tsongas. Let's do this in TV sound bites, okay? Around 30 seconds per answer. If you want to talk, raise your hand, and we'll just use up the last 5 minutes that we have. Go right ahead.
First of all, the Time magazine story, they never talk with us. It's going to be in this coming week, number one. Number two, Rocky Mountain News, evaluating the ad. Evaluating the Clinton ad, quote, misleading. Number three, I take a pledge. Let's all agree. No ads, no attacking each other, no ads against each other. You know, come on.
What about your ad?
Finish.
What about your ad, Senator?
You take your ads off. I started yesterday because you've been on my back for a long time. Put your hand up. Oh, put your hand up, Bill. No negative ads. Put your hand up.
From NBC News, Decision 92, Super Tuesday. Here from New York is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Voters on this Super Tuesday put Bill Clinton and President Bush solidly in the winner's circle tonight, but with reservations. At a time of great anxiety in this country about the present and the future, the only real enthusiasm about these candidates seems to be in their own families and among their hardcore supporters. This day was the toughest test yet in the primary season. 11 states for the Democrats, 8 for the Republicans. About a third of the delegates needed for the nomination. Primaries in Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Democratic caucuses in Delaware, Missouri, and Hawaii. And as I say, a clean sweep for the president tonight, a very impressive win for Bill Clinton, especially in the big pivotal states of Texas and in Florida. We want to show you the winners now, beginning on the Democratic side. As you can see, Bill Clinton, a native of the South, did extremely well in Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi. His now principal Democratic challenger, Paul Tsongas, a native son of Massachusetts, won that state, also next door in Rhode Island. And now we can project Paul Tsongas, the winner in the Delaware caucuses tonight as well.
The people in the South heard the worst about me, but they saw the best. They know that the true measure of character in politics can never be perfection, because if it were, no one could pass. The true measure is genuine commitment that lasts day in and day out through failures and disappointment and defeat and setback. The true measure is rooted in a desire to do better and a belief that it is always possible to do better and that we are morally bound to do better.
And we've got to go into, that's not true.
You know it's true.
Now, will you just calm down? Now, you know,
He's addressing you. Let him speak. I'm listening.
let me tell you something. If I were dying of ambition, I wouldn't have stood up here and put up with all this crap I've put up with in the last 6 months. I'm fighting to change this country. And let me tell you something else. You do not have the right to treat any human human being, including me, with no respect because of what you're worried about. I did not cause it. I'm trying to do something about it. I have treated you and all the people who've interrupted my rallies with a hell of a lot more respect than you treated me. And it's time you started thinking about that.
Although Paul Tsongas had dropped out of the race, he allowed his name to stay on the ballot in New York, site of the next big presidential primary. Polls there actually showed that Tsongas had a pretty good chance of winning the primary, even though he wasn't even campaigning. Jerry Brown was busy soliciting the support of organized labor and other traditionally liberal groups.
4 years ago, George Bush spoke to the Republican convention and told the American people that he was a quiet man who heard the voices of quiet people. Well, it turned out he scared those quiet people away from his good and decent opponent, but once he got in office, he could not hear their voice or feel their pain. He left them to twist in the wind of fate. And I tell you tonight, my friends, the quiet people are going to have someone who hears their voice, who feels their pain, and who will work with them to change their lives. That's what this election's all about.
We used to have the world's greatest economic engine. We let it slip away. And with it went millions of jobs and taxpayers. Let's take a little time and figure out what happened to the engine. Let's raise the hood and go to work. Let's diagnose the problem. I can tell you before we look at the engine, an engine tune-up won't fix it. We're going to have to do a major overhaul. To help you understand how fast this debt has grown and when it grew, the green is the debt we had in 1980. The red is the debt that has been incurred in the last 12 years. We've had an enormous growth in debt.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Then George Bush signed the second biggest tax increase in American history.
Read my lips.
George Bush increased taxes on the middle class. Bush doubled the beer tax and increased the gas tax by 56%. Now George Bush wants to give a $108,000 tax break to millionaires. $108,000. Guess who's going to pay? We can't afford 4 more years.
This election is about change. Change in our party, change in our leadership, change in our nation. It's been 30 years since a Democrat ran for president and asked something of all the American people. I intend to challenge you all to do more and to do better.
Bill Clinton has the heart, the talent, the vision for the job. Governor Clinton entered the presidential race, pledging to fight for the forgotten middle class. He's talking about what average people are concerned about.
We've got to engage in the old-fashioned work of confronting the real problems of real people.
Clinton's message is new, young, moderate. The Philadelphia Inquirer calls him the moderate radical, saying Bill Clinton has sizzle and substance. If Clinton represents the Democrats in 1992, George Bush will know he's in a contest.
I refuse to be part of a generation of Americans that fails to compete in the global economy and so condemns hard-working, middle-class Americans to a lifetime of struggle without reward or security.
Governor Bill Clinton, born in Hope, Arkansas, educated at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and Yale Law School, a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, elected state attorney general at 28. The nation's youngest governor, elected 5 times. He's the longest serving sitting governor in the country. And this year, he was voted most effective in the nation by his fellow governors, both Democrat and Republican. Together with his wife Hillary and their daughter Chelsea, Bill Clinton has taken on the challenge to preserve the American dream, rid our streets of crime and drugs, protect our environment, restore the hopes of the forgotten middle class, and reclaim the future for our children.
Today, as we stand on the threshold of a new era and a new millennium, I believe we need a new kind of leadership. Leadership not mired in the politics of the past, leadership not tied to the old ideologies, but proven leadership, capable of reinventing government to help solve those real problems real people face.
This is not just an election. It's a crusade for the future. A crusade to restore the forgotten middle class. A crusade for the soul of America. But we need your help, your energy, your active involvement, and your financial support. Join the Clinton Crusade for the future. The crusade to restore the American dream. Contact the Clinton for President campaign. Together, we can build a brighter future for America.
Years ago, my son Albert was struck by a car crossing the street after watching a baseball game in Baltimore. Tipper and I watched as he was thrown 30 feet through the air and scraped another 20 feet on the pavement after he hit the ground. I ran to his side and held him and called his name. But he was limp and still, without breath or pulse. His eyes were open with the empty stare of death, and we prayed, the two of us, there in the gutter, with only my voice. His injuries, inside and out, were massive, and for terrible days, he lingered between life and death. Tipper and I spent the next 30 days and nights there at his bedside. Our family was lifted and healed in no small measure by an incredible outpouring of love and compassion and prayers from thousands and thousands of people, most of whom we never even knew. We are part of something much larger than ourselves. All of us are part of something much greater than we are capable of imagining. And my friends, if you look up for a moment from the rush of your daily lives, you will hear the quiet voices of your country crying out for help.
Join us, work with us, win with us, and we can make our country the country it was meant to be.
Red-blooded, one bona fide citizen, and I'm proud to be called a Republican because I love this nation I was born in. Yeah, that's right, I'm a black man, and I'll fight for the truth that I must defend because I love this nation that I'm living in.
When it's cold outside, I've got the moon.
coming here biased, that we're coming here as liberals, that we're coming here to make...
I've watched MTV for 8 years, and I have never seen them portray anything political from an open-minded viewpoint where they showed the right and the left. They showed the left every time. To me, PC and liberalism is worse than McCarthyism ever was.
Yeah. Wait a second. What did you just say?
I said the PC movement is more stringent, it's more vindictive, and it's more dangerous than the McCarthyism and the McCarthy movement could have ever been and ever was.
The media has shown the conservative view as the religious right, and that's totally untrue. The true conservative view is everyone has control over themselves. It's laissez-faire. They have control over their own body. I mean, unfortunately,
what about the choices of the baby that's unborn? What about the fact that if we're going to give a woman a choice in this country, what about the women that are still in the womb? What about the women that are forming in the womb? The Supreme Court has already said that life starts at conception, and we should allow those people. We should allow those people to have the baby come out and let the baby decide.
Speaking of the media, for more than a month, the media have been telling us that Bill Clinton and Al Gore are moderates. If they're moderates, then I'm a world champion speller. My feelings about big government come from my experience. I spent half my adult life in the private sector. My opponent has a different experience. He's been in government nearly all his life. His passion to expand government knows no bounds. And he's already proposed, and listen to this carefully, he has already proposed $220 billion in new spending, along with the biggest tax increase in history, $150 billion, and that's just to start.
Are there important issues of character separating you from these other two men?
I think the American people should be the judge of that. I think character is a very important question. I said something the other day where I was accused of being like Joe McCarthy, because I put it this way, I think it's wrong to demonstrate against your own country or organize demonstrations against your own country in foreign soil. I just think it's wrong. That maybe they say, well, it's a youthful indiscretion. I was 19 or 20 flying off an aircraft carrier, and that shaped me to be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. And I'm sorry, but demonstrating, it's not a question of patriotism, it's a question of character and judgment. They get on me, Bill's gotten on me about read my lips, and when I make a mistake, I'll admit it. But he has not admitted a mistake, and I just find it impossible to understand how an American can demonstrate against his own country in a foreign land, organizing demonstrations against it, when young men are held prisoner in Hanoi or kids out of the ghetto were drafted. Some say, well, you're a little old-fashioned. Maybe I am, but I just don't think that's right. Now, whether it's character or judgment, whatever it is, I have a big difference here on this issue. And so we'll just have to see how it plays out. But I couldn't do that. And I don't think most Americans could do that.
I think American people will make their own decisions on character. And at a time when we have work to do and we need action, I think they need to clearly understand the backgrounds of each person. I think the press can play a huge role in making sure that the backgrounds are clearly presented in an objective way. Then make a decision. Certainly anyone in the White House should have the character to be there. But I think it's very important to measure when and where things occurred. Did they occur when you were a young person in your formative years, or did they occur while you were a senior official in the federal government? When you're a senior official in the federal government spending billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, and you're a mature individual, and you make a mistake, then that was on our ticket. If you make it as a young man, time passes. So I would say just, you know, look at all three of us, decide who you think will do the job, pick that person in November, because believe me, as I've said before, the party's over, and it's time for the cleanup crew.
Governor Clinton, you have 1 minute.
Ross gave a good answer, but I've got to respond directly to Mr. Bush. You have questioned my patriotism. You even brought some right-wing congressmen into the White House to plot how to attack me for going to Russia in 1969, 1970, when over 50,000 other Americans did. Now, I honor your service in World War II. I honor Mr. Perot's service in uniform and the service of every man and woman who ever served, including Admiral Crowell, who was your chairman of the Joint Chiefs and who's supporting me. But when Joe McCarthy went around this country attacking people's patriotism, he was wrong. He was wrong. And a senator from Connecticut stood up to him named Prescott Bush. Your father was right to stand up to Joe McCarthy. You were wrong to attack my patriotism. I was opposed to the war, but I love my country. And we need a president who will bring this country together, not divide it. We've had enough division. I want to lead a unified country.
Let me talk a little bit about trust and character. That counts very, very much. I'm bringing up my kids and my grandkids to believe that trust and character are important. Bill Clinton stands up and with a perfectly lovely face says, that's if you like his face, says, you know, sort of, trust me, I've done all these wonderful things for Arkansas. Arkansas is the 50th state in the environment. His education program, which he raves over, is 25th out of 28 on the ACT tests. His teacher pay is the lowest of any state.
People are also concerned about the economy.
You bet they are, and they ought to be. We're in a worldwide recession, and every other country in the world, with very few exceptions, have had these horrendous fluctuations. England, France, Germany, Japan today. George Bush has kept us stable. We're the world's largest exporter. And thanks to George Bush, trade barriers are down. And if we get NAFTA signed by the Congress, you just watch this economy.
You know, we still have 7.6% unemployment. If you were unemployed, or you had a neighbor who was, wouldn't you be considering voting for Clinton?
No, because when we had Carter, we had 17% in Michigan alone, but in most states we had 11 or 12%. I certainly wouldn't want a tax and spend president right now with a tax and spend Congress. Those are all women's issues. Those are things
I've interviewed a variety of women, and I've talked to a couple who said they voted for Reagan and they voted for Bush last time, but this time they're going to vote for Clinton because they think he cares about women.
Really? He does care about women, we all know that.
Bill Clinton says he'll only tax the rich to pay for his campaign promises. But here's what Clinton economics could mean to you. $1,088 more in taxes. $2,072 more in taxes. 100 leading economists say his plan means higher taxes and bigger deficits. $1,191 more in taxes. $2,072 more in taxes.
I saw the debate last night, and I just got one conclusion: it's all George Bush.
I still have a lot of confidence in my president.
I feel we need Bush to keep us from a big spending Congress.
I don't trust Clinton.
The man says one thing and does another.
First he denies it, and then he says, well, maybe it happened. You can't trust him.
Clinton gets in, what we're going to see are more taxes.
One thing that's got me definitely for Bush is I remember what happened the last time we did things the way Bill Clinton wants to do them.
The world is in transition. The defining challenge of the 90s is to win the economic competition, to win the peace. We must be a military superpower, an economic superpower, and an export superpower. In this election, you'll hear two versions of how to do this. Theirs is to look inward, ours is to look forward.
Welcome back to Facing the Future with Bill Clinton. There are many people here that still haven't gotten a chance to ask a question. We're almost out of time. So we're going to start a rapid round of questioning now, sort of have some fun with short questions that can be answered with short answers, or even just a yes or no. What's your question for the governor?
If you had to do over again, would you inhale?
Sure, if I could. I tried before.
I have a question right here.
Yes. How has the national debt personally affected each of your lives? And if it hasn't, how can you honestly find a cure for the economic problems of the common people if you have no experience in what's ailing them?
Well, I think the national debt affects everybody. Obviously, it has a lot to do with interest rates. It has.
She's saying you personally.
On a personal basis, how has it affected you?
Has it affected you personally?
Well, I'm sure it has. I love my grandchildren. I want to think think that they're going to be able to afford an education. I think that that's an important part of being a parent. Maybe I won't get it wrong. Are you suggesting that if somebody has means, that the national debt doesn't affect them?
What I'm saying,
I'm not sure I get it. Help me with the question, and I'll try to answer it.
I've had friends that have been laid off from jobs.
Yeah.
I know people who cannot afford to pay the mortgage on their homes, their car payment. I have personal problems with the national debt, but how has it affected you? And if you have no experience in it, how can you help us if you don't know what we're feeling?
I think she means more the recession, the economic problems today the country faces, rather than the deficit.
You ought to be in the White House for a day and hear what I hear and see what I see and read the mail I read and touch the people that I touch from time to time. I was in the Lomax AME church. It's a black church just outside of Washington, D.C. And I read in the bulletin about teenage pregnancies, about the difficulty that families are having to make ends meet. I talk to parents. I mean, you got to care. Everybody cares if people aren't doing well. But I don't think it's fair to say you haven't had cancer, therefore you don't know what it's like. I don't think it's fair to say, whatever it is, that if you haven't been hit by it personally, but everybody's affected by the debt because of the tremendous interest that goes into paying on that debt. Everything's more expensive. Everything comes out of your pocket and my pocket. So it's that. But I think in terms of the recession, of course you feel it when you're president of the United States. And that's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education systems. Thank you. I'm glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again. You know people who lost their jobs and lost their homes? Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the President sign laws that make us do more things and gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest claims to be back and better than ever. If that's true, why is he here? Please welcome to the program the always interesting, dynamic Donald Trump. Donald. Welcome to the program. Good
nice
to see you.
Be with you, David.
You know, people have interest in you for a couple of reasons.
I can't imagine what that would be.
Let's just get right to the stuff that people want to know about. First of all, are you solvent?
Well, I've had a hell of a year. I've had a good year. I had a miserable year last year along with everybody else in the real estate industry. But this year has been, as you know, sort of from reading the New York press, a good year for me. And the politicians killed the real estate industry, and we've done great.
Now, see, I don't know what that means when you say the politicians killed the real estate industry. What does that mean?
1986, they passed a tax change, the 1986 law, which really, you look at what happened with Olympia in New York and Reichman and everybody else, and it's big trouble.
They lost incentives. Real estate no longer became a good place to put your dough.
Exactly.
I'm not sure I understand that last little thing, but let's go on to something else. H. Ross Perot, what do you think of this guy?
I think he's interesting. I think he's got a real shot. Again, I watch what happened with the real estate industry, done by the politicians to a large extent, and I'm very disappointed in the president for not having stopped it. The economy cannot come back unless the real estate industry comes back, and unless they put the incentives back into real estate. And the politicians are starting to find that. There's a lot of different things happening, and you could see some real movement in that. But I am very disappointed with the administration, what they allowed to happen to this industry. It fuels every other industry.
Okay, but let's get back to the question. H. Ross Perot, is he a legitimate candidate, a viable candidate? Could he step into the bureaucracy of the United States government and make a change, make anything work any better than it works now? I don't know.
I mean, he doesn't know his positions, and frankly, neither do I right now. Yeah. And you're going to have to see what happens. I think that he's certainly viable. He's got some great quips and some great color, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, with the Electoral College, anything could happen. You could have the two winners not winning and the third man getting in because it's a democratically controlled Congress.
Press, let's go. The longest day of Bill Clinton's campaign for president started before dawn Monday. The first stop, a diner in Philadelphia.
Thank you. Thanks.
It's the day before the election.
Back at Clinton headquarters in Little Rock, campaign staffers are gearing up for what will be their last day in the war room.
Thousands of people waiting for Clinton this morning outside of the Philly diner in the rain. Looks absolutely great on TV this morning.
I have 9 cities to go, but remember, on the last day of this great campaign to change America, I started it in the city where America began much of its future, Philadelphia. Goodbye. I love you.
The next stop, Cleveland. From the plane, Governor Clinton checks in with his staff at campaign headquarters in Little Rock.
Are we still ahead in the poll in Arizona?
It's tight, but it's possible.
It is an emotional time for me. I'm very nervous. I'm very hopeful. I know it's not a done deal, and I get very nostalgic about my friend of 20 years, maybe being elected president of this country.
In Cleveland, Clinton, hoarse from delivering too many speeches, addresses his second rally of the day.
I have nearly lost my voice trying to give you a voice in Washington on Tuesday.
Why is he talking? Because he can't help himself.
The voice. The voice sounds all right this morning.
Well, the voice is making remarkable comebacks at every landing, you know, because it's very shaky. But it's okay. He's going to be fine.
Enthusiastic crowds at a campaign rally are often an illusion. Most of them are generated by the campaigns themselves. Professionals depend on more reliable indicators.
These are my lucky charm, these gloves. I got to keep my hands clean and pure so when I touch the victory.
We were just talking at the other end of this thing with your partner, and you were kidding with me about it before. He is apparently now going to be wearing black gloves between now.
Is that his latest?
Yes, that's his latest. So do you want to?
That's better than not changing his underwear.
So do you want to show us what you've got here?
Here we go.
This is your...
This is my Deguayo tie, the Mexican death song.
The Mexican death sign.
Which
all
is...
right. And why are you wearing that tie?
No prisoners, no mercy, no quarter. We don't want to coast into this, man. We just want to drive a stake through their heart.
All right.
Then it's back on the plane. The subject on everyone's mind, Clinton's lead in the polls.
CNN has it at 8. ABC has it at 7.
If you took all the polls that are out there, the NBC, our polls, CNN's polls, they'd all average out around 7 or 8 points. I think you could be fairly comfortable with that.
Children shouldn't play with matches. Media people shouldn't play with polls. They're dangerous things. They blow up in your face.
One of the things that has struck all of us in this campaign is the importance of a candidate trip into a state. There is an immediate effect, 2 points, maybe even 3 points in some cases. So, you know, it's almost like a football game. Who gets the ball last can make a difference. And that can turn a narrow defeat into a narrow victory.
Another stop, another rally, the third of the day, this time in Detroit.
How do you do it?
Must be really fatigued. It's the last lap, man. I'll tell you what.
The Clinton Marathon touches down in Paducah, Kentucky.
This is the 5th stop I have made today. We began in Pennsylvania. We went to Ohio. We went to Michigan.
Pennsylvania has a governor who's not supporting us. Ohio has a Republican governor. Michigan has a Republican governor. And Missouri has a Republican governor. And so we have to be there to make sure that to counteract the infrastructure in those states.
By this time, almost everyone is having a hard time focusing. The media is bored by the repetitive speeches, and everyone is showing fatigue, except Bill Clinton.
Hey, Governor!
Does this mean you think it's time for a change in America?
Does this mean you think your candidate was right in going to Paducah against all advice?
I'm proud of you. I'm grateful to you.
Come see me when I get home in the morning. I want you to be the company to
I was kidding James yesterday. I said he's about to pass from the role of regular human being into the role of a legend. And I think he really deserves it. Because probably for the first time in a generation tomorrow, we're going to win.
Good evening once again. We're now getting to the crucial part of the evening with a substantial number of polls closing in states around the country, representing altogether 205 electoral votes. And the way it's shaping up right now, this could be another passage year as it was in 1960, when the torch was passed to a new generation, as it was in 1980, when a new Republican Party took over with Ronald Reagan. Here are the polls closing. As you can see, all of those states now, the polls are closing at this hour. And based on our analysis of interviews with the voters that we have seen in many of those states, we can now make these projections for Bill Clinton. All good news for him. 23 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. In Illinois, 22 electoral votes. The battleground state of Michigan, which has gone Republican the last 3 times, 18 electoral votes. In New Jersey, 15 electoral votes. Bill Clinton the winner there. In Massachusetts, which has been safely for the Democrats in recent elections, that goes to Bill Clinton's column. Missouri, 10. Maryland, 11. Connecticut, 8. Now, Connecticut is the ancestral home of the George Bush family, obviously. And Bill Clinton is our projected winner in Connecticut tonight as well. And this will not go over well with the Bush family. They, of course, have their summer home at Walker's Point in Maine. We are projecting that Maine is the winner for Bill Clinton. Now, one of those electoral votes could go to Ross Perot, because in Maine and Nebraska, they divide their electoral votes by the congressional districts, and there's a possibility that Ross Perot could pick off one of those electoral votes, but then, after all, he spent $60 million. He ought to get something for it. In the District of Columbia, which has been safely Democratic as well, 3 electoral votes to Bill Clinton. What does that mean now on our national map? We want to show you as we begin to color that in red. As you can see, the lone state that we've been able to call for President Bush tonight is the state of Indiana, Dan Quayle's home state, and it's been one of the most safely Republican states in this century for the Republicans. Electoral votes, 270 required. Bill Clinton now beginning very swiftly to close in on that number.
CBS headline of the hour, Clinton now has 254 of the 270 Electoral College votes needed to win. However, he may not go over the top until after the polls close in California and some other places in the West. We'll just have to see. It's Clinton 254, Bush 55. God bless you, he said. Perot hated it when Newsweek magazine put a picture of him on the cover and put "quit" over his head. No person born in Texas, or for that matter anywhere else, wants anything to do with that 4-letter word. And it's one of the reasons Ross Perot got back in. Ed Bradley?
I think that was the biggest reason for his getting back in. Personally, I don't think he'd run in 96. I think he got back into this campaign because he wanted to reclaim what he feels is his good name.
We're now over a third of the popular vote counted so far. Bill Clinton with a 4-point lead. Ross Perot is holding firm at 17. Most of the polls in Texas closed at 8, but some, I'm told now, are probably open until 9:30 Central Time. Some of the polls down there, almost all of them, have closed. That's probably true. I have another state that we want to call for Bill Clinton that puts him just moments away now from winning 270 electoral votes. He wins the state of Wisconsin, which took a little longer than we anticipated tonight. It went Democratic in 76 and 88, so we color Wisconsin red now. Solidly in the Midwest, he's just 5 electoral votes away from winning. Bill Clinton, the 2 Dakotas could do that, form a combination of Montana, and then, of course, we still have California to come in with its big 54 electoral votes, so he's home free.
We're going to make another projection now. We project that Bill Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. We project that Ohio has gone for Governor Clinton. Let's take a look at the big board. We go from 265 electoral votes up over the 270 number. Bill Clinton is going to be, by our projection, the next president of the United States. There are 31 electoral votes in Ohio. We project 21 electoral votes in Ohio. That is downtown Little Rock. They're hearing the news as well. President Bush won it in 1988. Voted for a Democrat only twice since 1952 has Ohio, and last voted for Jimmy Carter in 1976. So by our projection, at a little before 11 o'clock Eastern Time, just a couple of minutes before the polls close in California, we project that Governor Clinton has gone over the 270 votes he has needed.
That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Si longtemps déjà,
What your country can do for you. Ask
j'ai
what you
oublié
can do for your
comment.
country.
This particular inaugural has already been
Tant
shaken
de
by the
mots,
rumbling of
de
American
moments.
bombs falling far away. Very real symbolism that what counts is not the
depuis
party,
longtemps.
but the very daunting morning after.
Devant ce mur muet, faut chercher autrement, chercher
When Leopolis came back to
autrement.
Little Rock to market copying machines, the 2 men who first met on a 4th grade playground renewed their friendship. And after the election, when Mr. Clinton relaxed with longtime friends, David Leopolis first proposed a toast to the president-elect, then went shopping for the inaugural festivities. Once in Washington, the entire Leopolis delegation was dazzled by the pre-inaugural celebration. But for David Leopolis, this morning was even better. The pre-dawn chill outside Blair House, then along the tidal basin, finally up Pennsylvania Avenue, the bond forged years ago between 2 8-year-olds remained as strong as ever.
Say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming? Photos des objets pour que ça nous revienne. Na 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 na. Des chansons d'autrefois, le nom de ces enfants. Il faut avoir le temps pour penser librement. Dans la pénombre de la nuit, le gris de l'obscurité.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
With those words, the change that the country voted for became official. The United States has a new president who happens to be younger than the Rolling Stones.
I challenge a new generation of young Americans to a season of service, to act on your idealism by helping troubled children, keeping company with those in need, reconnecting our torn communities. There is so much to be done.
Oh man, it's awesome. It's just like everybody's up, you know, everybody feels pumped, and hopefully that's
this will bring about a change in America.
All those American people, they were like, clapping and everything. Yeah, it was great. It's a real big deal to be here for, exchange students.
That's one of the most exciting things I've ever experienced.
Okay, welcome back to MTV's first ever rock and roll inaugural ball from the Convention Center in Washington, D.C. With me now is another Bill Clinton supporter, Marky Mark. What turned you on about Bill Clinton?
Well, actually, it was the way he opened up to young America. He appeared on MTV, he appeared at a lot of places that Bush or anybody else who was running wouldn't, and he really opened up to young America, and I think that was the key. I mean, I never thought about voting, until I started watching, and I always got MTV on. I'm sitting at home, it's video after video, and, he came on and he really spoke about, things that I wanted to know about. I don't think he touched on as many things as I wanted to, but, it's a start. I know we got a lot of big problems. Everybody's faced with a lot of troubles. In 93, everybody seems to be partying on the positive side. It's a good sign.
Well, there is quite a contingent of Canadian entertainers at Clinton inaugural events. Raffi, Celine Dion, K.D. Lang, Bruce Cockburn, and of course, rompin' Ronnie Hawkins, who was in a class by himself. He's lived in Canada for years, but he was born in Arkansas, and he's also an FOB, a friend of Bill. Governor Clinton used to have Hawkins over to the State House to entertain, and President Clinton made sure Hawkins was part of the big show in Washington as well. Paul McGrath followed the Hawk on his excellent American adventure.
Ready, everybody? Come on. 1, 2, 3.
Right off the bat, the entrance of the icy Razorback Hog signaled the loose Arkansas flavor of the Clinton parties. Blue jeans, not tuxedos, were the norm, and the soundtrack was deep-fried Southern rock and roll. It was an old home week atmosphere with familiar food and drink for the visiting Ronnie Hawkins.
Well, I'm so happy to meet the Hawk.
Well, it's a pleasure, dear. I thought, how could you be an Arkansas girl and not know me?
The Hawk was in his element, with musical friends like saxophonist Clarence Clemens, the great fiddler Vassar Clements, the band's drummer Levon Helm, and the band's producer, John Simon.
A rock and roll president, boy, I like that.
Canadians were everywhere. Pianist Rick Bell, an old Hawkins sideman. And the band's keyboard player, Garth Hudson. They both backed up the performances at the opening Blue Jeans Bash, a 5-hour parade of rock celebrities.
You remember Wild Willie, Garth?
For Hawkins, it was business as usual, playing the straight-ahead Arkansas rock and roll that made him famous 35 years ago and has been his bread and butter ever since. He's passed it on now to his Canadian-born son, an accomplished guitarist. It's been a while since the Hawk had this stellar a band behind him, and he drank it right up.
My little Willie, what your baby gonna say? My little Willie, what your baby gonna say? When the police come, take a Willie away.
After he won the election, we got a letter saying that, if I could change our itinerary around to where we could show up for the for the inauguration and stuff, and so I thought, boy, that would be fun, and so that's what we did.
So it took you about 2 seconds to say yes to that.
Oh, I didn't have to think that long.
The Blue Jeans Bash, with all its stars, looked and sounded like the last waltz. Hawkins called it the first tango. The Clinton influence was clear in the Southern cooking and in the unanimous sense of imminent change. On the stage, a new crowd of once anti-establishment performers. Goodbye to White House regulars like Frank Sinatra. Hello, Bob Dylan. These were people who wouldn't even have whistled Dixie for George Bush or Ronald Reagan.
Well, what does it mean for, to have that kind of music, to have all those rockers on stage in support of a president? It used to be rock and roll was the enemy.
But I've never seen it. Oh, man, when I started playing rock and roll, you were 2 pay grades below a prisoner of war. I'm not kidding you. And, you know, the churches were preaching against us in the schools. You know, I mean, it was tough.
But it used to be the outlaw music, and here it is now, clearly part of the establishment in Washington.
Well, that's because everybody's outlaws now.
You'd be hard put not to sense the change here in Washington. The inaugural parties that Ronnie Hawkins has come here to help kick off are happening in small clubs, and there's barely a tuxedo in sight. You can only guess at what that means for the Clinton presidency, but suffice it to say, in 200 years of inaugurals, Washington has never rocked like this. Here, it's a smaller but wilder Arkansas party. The Hawk came to Canada 30 years ago, loved it, and stayed. But in Arkansas, memories are long and heroes are never forgotten.
Off 47 miles of backward, use a Hoover steak low a necktie. Got a brand new house on the rooftop, paper at a steak. Got a brand new chimney made on top, made from a human skull. Come on, mama, take a little walk, tell me, who do you love? Who do you love?
I'm Paul McGrath, CBC News.
Well, I love Bill Clinton in Washington tonight, that's for sure.
Well, as Paul said, you know, there are a lot of parties all over Washington tonight. Apparently, Bill Clinton did not get to Ronnie Hawkins' party because security was worried about it. And if you've ever seen a Hawkins concert, then you know why security was worried. However, Bill Clinton did get to one party, and this is what he did.
Guess what he did. Changing.
Well, we know he can play the saxophone.
Yeah.
Now can he lead?
Now
I guess
we'll find out what happens tomorrow.
I'm Peter Mansbridge. Thanks for watching Primetime News tonight.
I'm Pamela Wallen. We'll see you all again tomorrow night.
Bye-bye.
Howdy-ho, guys. I came to Washington to pass my own Clean Air Act, the Urkel Air Act. Most people think it's very difficult to get a bill passed, but I'm here to show you that it's as easy as growing mold. Okay, let's go right to the numero uno, the head honcho, the biggest guy of all. Mr. President.
Hello.
Wow. My name is Stephen Q. Urkel, and I was wondering if you can endorse my Urkel Air Bill. It will definitely provide a clean and safe environment.
Don't you think I ought to read it first?
Well, that might be a good idea. Oh, would you like a copy?
I would like a copy of it.
Well, I'll make sure I get it over to you.
This is the place to start.
Huh?
In the Congress first, then I get to sign it.
Okay. Oh, well, you can sign it right now. We can just bypass all that other stuff.
It's a nice day for doing something.
Oh, it's such a beautiful day. It's been wonderful. You know, we've already had one event outside. I love it when we have those outdoor events when it's not too heavy and hot.
This is all new?
This is a new rug. We had this rug built, or made, if you will, woven by a wonderful company on Long Island. Immigrant families from Italy came over several decades ago now, and they did wonderful work. It's beautiful. When I came here, I thought the office should have a darker rug. You can see how light it is. It's wonderful to work in. There's a lot of lighting and a lot of natural light, and I think it's better. So we finally got it in. I like it a lot.
When was the first time you ever came to this office in your life?
When President Carter was here. I was in the Oval Office a couple of times, and so that would be in the late 70s, and then in 1980 I was here right before he left office.
Was it a special thing?
Oh, sure. It's a terrific place, and it carries so much of the history of the White House, although a lot of people don't know that the Oval Office is actually the newest room in the White House. It was not built until Franklin Roosevelt became president. He loved these oval rooms, and he kept an Oval Office and one of the rooms up here in the White House, in the residence. So he built this in 1934. It's a wonderful place.
Do you use it as a working office?
Yes. Not every president has, but I do.
Why did you decide to do that?
Because I like working here. I like, it's open, it's airy, you can have a significant number of people in meetings. You've always got a lot of natural light. It's a comfortable place for me to work. I work here alone a lot. I have a little office back here in the back that is smaller, that I go sometimes to read or just to be alone for half an hour, sometimes take a brief nap. But by and large, I work here. And then I have an office up in the White House where I work at night, and sometimes on the weekends. But I really do like working here. Not every president has, but I do. I can spend hours here. I never get tired of this room.
This is a spot that people love to ponder. Is this all yours?
Yeah, these are all just my things. They're my bust of Franklin Roosevelt, my bust of Abraham Lincoln, my book's a copy of the first authorized biography of Abraham Lincoln going back to his campaign in 1860, a book on Robert Kennedy that I wrote the introduction of on the 25th anniversary of his death, a book of Václav Havel's letters that he wrote to his wife when he was in prison. President Kennedy had this desk, and
let me get out of the way here.
If you look down here, this is a door, and his son, when he was very young, was crawling under the desk, pushed that little door open and crawled out, and a photographer caught that, and the picture appeared all over the world. It's sort of a symbol of Kennedy's youth and vigor and the fact that he had this neat young person, a young son. And it's interesting that John Kennedy Jr. was in this room and saw this desk for the first time in a very long time, not very long ago. But this desk before that was used by Franklin Roosevelt over in the White House to give his fireside chats. So the famous fireside chats were delivered from this desk.
If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. The exploration of space will go ahead. Whether we join in it or not, we mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond. Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men.